Have you ever seen someone smile with gritted teeth and just know they're done pretending? That was the vibe Maddie Brush had when she spoke about Meri Brown. You can sense it, courteous words on the surface, but beneath it is all about boundary energy. And when she declared Meri as too harsh to ever bond with my kids, that wasn't a remark. That was a declaration, a neon borderline. And why is that? Because let's be real, that is not a phrase you say lightly in the world of sister wives. That is emotional fireworks, and it is crazy, isn't it? The lady who was once first wife, the lady who laid the groundwork for this entire family structure, now being labeled as too harsh for the grandkids. You can almost sense the generational stress in that moment, the simmering frustration that has been growing for years at last speaking up. Let's break it down because this is not just about Meri and Maddie. It is what happens when emotional walls are ingrained in the family gene pool. When Maddie uttered that sentence, "Meri's too harsh to ever bond with my kids," it wasn't huffy, it wasn't sensational, it was even almost blasé. And that evenness, that is the thing that hurts. Because when somebody doesn't scream, doesn't rail, doesn't even wince, they've already absorbed the reality. Maddie wasn't trying to start a fight. She was drawing a boundary, and doing it with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from years of watching, learning, and deciding. I am not repeating that pattern. You could feel it in her tone. This was not about pettiness or gossip. This was about protection. A mom declaring, "I know who is safe for my children and who isn't." And the thing is, that is a biggie in the Brown family culture. For years, Meri has had that image, tough, straightforward, guarded. But when someone like Maddie, normally measured and diplomatic, speaks up like that, it shows you there is more depth to it. Let's roll back for a second. Remember those early seasons when Meri was trying to maintain a grip of a family that just kept growing around her? There were times when her tone, her tension, even her silence spoke louder than her words ever had. You saw it in her eyes when the other wives clicked, when the children gravitated toward the gentler temperaments, that seething edge, that silent heartache that sometimes became defensive. Now, years later, we are witnessing the ripple effect. The children are not only grown, they have developed opinions of their own. They have survived the aftershocks of all that emotional commotion. And Maddie, she is opting for peace for her children, even at the cost of distance. And that is what is so powerful here. She didn't call Meri toxic. She didn't drag her. She simply declared a truth and let it be. And that silence afterwards, it was louder than any confrontation, because this isn't about Meri being unkind. It is about Maddie declaring, "I am not letting that energy touch the next generation." Alice practically hears her thinking it. "I grew up in that storm. My kids don't need to." It is dense, isn't it? Because it is not mean, it is safeguarding. That is what makes it personal. And if you've ever had that person in your family, the one you love but keep at arm's length for your own sanity, then you understand what Maddie's talking about. Boundaries sometimes sound cold, but they're really healing. This was Maddie's emotional maturity on full display, calm, controlled, final. And I believe that on some level, Meri is aware of it too. Here is the thing about Meri. People notice the toughness, the sharpness, the restraint, but they lose sight of what established it. Those barriers did not appear overnight. They were constructed brick by brick from years of being the woman who needed to keep it together, while everything that she believed was forever began to slip from her grasp. Think back to early sister wives. Meri was the first wife, the one who played a part in establishing the family's laws, the one who should have been safe. And then gradually, she became the stranger in her own house. One by one, she lost her sense of belonging. So what does someone like that do? They harden, they shut themselves off. They lose faith in softness because softness continued to hurt them. And that is the tragic thing. The same armor that prevented Meri from cracking under the pressure also prevented her from ever fully connecting. That cutting edge we observe now, it is nothing more than self-preservation masquerading as strength. So when Maddie states, "Meri's too harsh to bond with my kids," she isn't wrong. But she is also identifying the result of an ache that Meri's never fully gotten over. Let's be real, though. Kids aren't privy to all that context. They don't experience the heartache, the loneliness, the supper silences. They only catch the vibe. They feel the chill, the tension between people. And that is what Maddie's keeping her children away from, that emotional weight that stays present even sat. When nobody's fighting, Meri still has that grudge, not only against Kody, but against the entire system that traded her worth for a label. First wife used to mean power now. It seems like a reminder of all that she lost. it is no surprise she doesn't know how to let her guard down. Here's where it gets complicated, because for her, being strict or guarded is her way of being care. It is her way of keeping control of something in a world that keeps changing. She might think she's being firm, but to someone like Maddie, who grew up watching those emotional fireworks, it reads as hostility. And that's the generational split we're seeing play out right now. Meri's generation believed endurance meant love, stay, hold, survive. Maddie's generation believes love means safety, peace, emotional balance, boundaries. They're not speaking the same emotional language. And the sad part, they never will, likely. Because you can't construct a new relationship on the old pain, not when both are still fighting to demonstrate they were the one most hurt. So yeah, perhaps Maddie's tactless. Perhaps Meri feels attacked. But behind it, there is something very raw. Two women attempting to rewrite the same narrative from opposite sides. Meri wants to be loyal. Maddie wants to be safe, and neither of them is incorrect. That is why this entire scenario is so emotionally fraught. It is not a matter of sides, it is survival. You don't wake up one morning and suddenly say someone's too severe to be around your children. That takes time, like a splinter you forget about until one day it is too deep to ignore. Maddie's statement may have gone viral now, but the reality. That tension began years ago, before the cameras captured the cracks. Before the family fractured across borders and loyalties. Back then, when Maddie was a kid, she observed the emotional temperature of the family fluctuate with each fight, each murmured remark, each obligatory family portrait. Meri was always there, present, polished, but careful. She strode around as though she had to assure everyone she was okay, even when she wasn't. And if you were one of the children watching, you learned quickly what not to handle. You learned what not to discuss. You learned that sometimes love meant holding back. That is where all this too harsh business truly begins, not cruelty, but emotional reserve. Meri was strict, occasionally intense, and sometimes the kind of stringent that cooled the room. And perhaps that functioned when everybody was all about having a picture-perfect family for the cameras. But years down the line, the same energy no longer fits, because Maddie's family, her husband, her children, reside in a different beat now. They've constructed something less heavy. More expansive. There is laughter, there is honesty, even sarcasm that doesn't hurt. They've gotten used to peace as the norm, not the prize. So when Maddie gazes at Meri today, she doesn't look at the first wife or the victim of Kody's abandonment. She sees someone who continues to live as if she is still in emotional survival mode. Someone who can't turn off the control even when it is unnecessary. And that is where the heartbreak begins, because secretly, Maddie likely hopes it could be different. You can feel that in the way she phrased it. Not hateful, not cruel, just factual. Too harsh to ever bond with my kids. That's a sentence full of sadness, not spite. But Meri, she's hearing it through a different filter. One that turns any boundary into betrayal. In her mind, that comment says, "You're unworthy, you're unwanted." And that is the way long-term emotional hurt works. It warps everything. Even a plain old truth begins to sound like an attack. It is as if they're living two different emotional timelines, Maddie in the here and now guarding her peace, and Meri in the past attempting to recreate a history that continues to slip from her grasp. And who sits quietly in the background of all this? Kody, the man whose leadership style taught the entire family how to fight over emotional scraps. He drew the line years ago, and everybody's still playing that game, whether they know it or not. Maddie breaking that pattern isn't rebellion, it is repair. But for someone like Meri, it is the feeling of rejection. That is where the story really begins to hurt, because one woman's healing will always feel like another woman's abandonment. Whenever you follow the origins of conflict in this family, you find yourself standing in Kody Brown's shadow. He is the string that holds all the wounds together, even the ones that don't at first glance appear to be his fault. Let's get real. Kody didn't just construct a messy family, he constructed a pecking order. There were favorites, alliances, emotional switches, and nobody played that game better than Meri. Because to her, she had to. She was the OG, the one who helped build it all. But the moment Kody's attention started drifting, when the affection, the validation, the "I see you" moment started going elsewhere, Meri's walls went up higher. Her tone got sharper. Her patience is shorter. She became someone who was trying to win a game that was already rigged. And the kids noticed, especially Maddie. Consider it, growing up around all that, you learn emotional arithmetic at a young age. You determine who is safe to speak with, who is listening in, who is keeping score. You discover how love is rationed, and the one who is always uptight, on the defensive, correcting everybody. That is not the person you go running to for comfort. So when Kody made it obvious who he wanted to hang out with, when he floated from house to house like a king surveying his kingdom, everybody adjusted. Some became quieter. Some became angry. Some, like Maddie, became observant. And that is where her strength in quietness comes from today. She learned how to remain solid in the turmoil. She discovered that peace is not found in a parent's acceptance. It is found in no longer needing it. But for Meri, that lesson never stuck. She wanted Kody's approval. She wanted the family's approval. She wanted to be chosen again. And when you reside in that emotional starvation long enough, it becomes something weighty, something that overflows in every discussion, every encounter, even with individuals who've done nothing wrong. So when Maddie's children visit and Meri attempts to bond, that old tension seeps in. It is not on purpose, but it seeps through. Children are able to pick up on when a person is bearing resentment. They may not hear the tale, but they sense the tempest. That is the unkindness Maddie's referring to. Not screaming, not mean, spiritedness, but intensity. The weight that conveys, you are invading my territory, and I am not positive I believe in this serenity. And the twist of fate, Kody's the one who instilled that sensation. Yet Meri's the one still suffering the repercussions for it. Because Kody was able to leave behind his emotional chaos. He can blame distance on logistics, not history. But Meri and Maddie, they're still attempting to breathe in the air he left behind. This isn't just a family that is breaking apart. It is a family still learning what love looks like after all those decades of hierarchy. And in that quiet, the one where Maddie won't try to manufacture a pretend connection and Meri won't let her guard down. You can hear the echo of Kody's old rules. He may be no longer present in Maddie's life, but his blueprint's still there. Here is why Maddie is different. She doesn't have to scream to be heard. She doesn't have to call someone out by name or rant on social media. Her measured, even tone is the act of defiance, because in the Brown household, quiet once equaled compliance. But with Maddie, silence means clarity. When she says something like, "Meri's too harsh to ever bond with my kids," it's not to stir drama, it's to stop a cycle. She's breaking a generational pattern that everyone else just lived through and called normal. You can feel how intentional she is about it. She is bringing up her children in a whole different emotional climate, one based on openness and affection rather than tension and image management. That is a low-key revolution, and here is the surprise: she is not alone in this feeling. Christine, Janelle, even some of the older children, they've all suggested the same thing in their own ways. That Meri's energy, while maybe understandable, is still too heavy to be around. That it's hard to relax in a room where you're constantly being measured or misunderstood. What Maddie did was say what everyone else had been thinking for years. The difference: she was brave enough to say it out loud, and that changed everything. Because once one family member in that kind of family gets a boundary set, the other ones realize they can do it too. It is like permission. One instance of truthfulness lets everyone else get out of pretending. That is what terrifies Meri the most. Not the comment itself, but the ripple effect. Perhaps because when Maddie uttered those words, she didn't silence just one relationship. She shattered the illusion that everything could ever go back to how it was. It is over. The picture of the big, unified sister-wives family, gone. And deep down, everybody knows it. Around here, people love to say that Maddie throws verbal spears. But here's the part I don't think Maddie gets enough credit for. She is not doing it with anger. She is doing it because she loves her kids. She doesn't want them growing up believing love equals walking on eggshells. She doesn't want them to mistake tension for authority or coldness for care. So yeah, she spoke something that hurt. But occasionally truth needs to hurt before it makes you free. You can tell that even Janelle, her mother, is behind her. Janelle's always been about peacefulness, rational choice, and emotional intelligence. She likely taught Maddie to notice when energy doesn't feel safe. And now that is manifesting in the decisions Maddie's making for her own life. Maddie's not attempting to save Meri. She is not allowing her old energy into the next generation. That is strength. That is growth. And while the internet argues over if Maddie crossed a line, the reality is she is the first one who finally stopped trying to make everyone comfortable at her own cost. That is how you know a cycle's ending, not with yelling or chaos, but with quiet, unbreakable lines. Let's discuss Meri for a moment, because this is where things get messy. For years, Meri Brown created a persona: polished, robust, independent, misjudged. The woman who stuck by Kody through turmoil, who absorbed the emotional blows and remained faithful even when being faithful hurt. She has been the stoic one, the one who takes the high road. But of late, that facade has begun to crack, and Maddie's remark, that was when the mask slipped, because no matter how much Meri attempts to hold herself to be at peace, the next generation isn't swallowing it. They pick up on the tension, they sense the energy change when she enters a room. They read between the carefully crafted words. Maddie wasn't cruel, she was truthful. There is a difference. And that is what cuts Meri the deepest, because she is not accustomed to being viewed that way, by someone who witnessed her growing up rather than someone who feels sorry for her. Maddie witnessed it all. The chilly silences, the forced smiles, the moments when Meri's version of tough love crossed into emotional distance. This isn't about blame, it's about awareness. Meri's always been the kind of person who needs to control her narrative. She wants to explain, to clarify, to make sure people see her intentions. But what Maddie is asserting is basic. Your intentions don't eliminate the effect. That is what hurts so much. Because in situations like this, there is always someone who feels they're the glue and can't bear to be told that they were really part of the problem. When you really think about it, the entire Sister Wives narrative has always been one of perception vs. reality. The general public is allowed to see the smiles, the large family dinners, the everything is okay moments, but the individuals within it, they get to witness who actually shows up, who hears them, who builds safety, and who doesn't. And let's be real, Meri has had a hard time connecting for years with Kody, with the other wives, with the children. Even when she attempts to, there is this stiffness, this guard that prevents true connection from ever being possible. Maddie simply stated something everyone else was too proper to say, that emotional toughness doesn't magically vanish when cameras are no longer rolling. It stays, it informs the way the children perceive you. And that is where things get problematic. Because Meri may actually desire a connection with the next generation, but she has not earned their trust, not yet. And the thing about children, even grown-up ones, is they remember how you treated them. You can't redo that with an Instagram post or a podcast, quote. Maddie's not bad-mouthing her, she is painting her picture. And in doing so, she is making Meri confront something that is much more difficult than criticism in the public eye. Private truth. It is one thing when the internet accuses you of being cold. It is another when the ex-husband's daughter tells you she doesn't feel safe having you around her children. That ain't drama. That is legacy. And the longer Meri brushes it off, the more difficult it is going to be to reverse it. You know who has been eerily quiet throughout all this? Kody. And that silence isn't serving anyone. Because when Maddie stood up for Meri being too tough, people waited for Kody to jump in, to defend, to at least nod what is happening. But he didn't. Not a peep, not a post, not even a subtle family is complicated remark. And that silence, it is boisterous. It tells the world precisely what they already had a feeling about. Kody's become a master of emotional denial. When it gets awkward, he goes away. When the truth is revealed, he uses fogging and "I just want peace." But peace isn't born out of acts of pretense. Maddie's words hadn't been spur of the moment. They had been a culmination of years observing her dad's behavior. The same man who preached about family values but let his relationships fall apart one by one. And now, with Meri's reputation crumbling, he's watching from the sidelines, hoping it all blows over. But it won't, because silence is a choice. And in this case, it's a choice that sides with dysfunction. Let's be real. If Kody had pushed back and said something like, "I see why Maddie would feel that way, but I hope there is room for healing," it might have shifted the tone. It might have made space for accountability. But he didn't. Alternatively, he did what he typically does, emotionally compartmentalize, then discuss forgiveness without doing anything to make marred. It happened, and you can tell that pisses Maddie off. You can almost hear it in her words, the fatigue of someone who has waited their entire life for her dad to arrive in an emotionally authentic manner. Kody's silence doesn't just guard Meri. It invalidates Maddie. It is a message that her experience isn't as important as appearing on the surface to be fine. And that is the actual reason that this entire thing feels so raw. Because when your dad won't even validate your truth, you stop seeking his approval. You begin building your own version of peace. And that is what Maddie's doing. She is not demanding that he take sides. She's asking for him to take responsibility. And by not doing that, Kody's showing everyone that he's more worried about optics than connection. He's treating the whole situation like a PR issue, not a family one. Meanwhile, Meri's stewing, the kids are talking, and the fans are watching, all wondering how this family that once preached unity can't even have a basic conversation without someone retreating. And the irony, Kody continues to insist that he needs healing and restoration. But healing does not begin with a camera crew and a confession interview. Healing begins with listening to your own children, particularly when what they have to say hurts. Maddie's message was not intended to destroy. It was intended to awaken. But right now, Kody's silence is putting the whole family back to sleep. Because if there's one thing we've learned about this man, it's that he doesn't just avoid conflict, he dodges responsibility. And that, more than anything, is why this family continues to break down in slow motion. If there is one person whose silence means something else, it is Janelle's. With Kody's silence, we feel like he is avoiding something, but with Janelle's, we feel like it is quiet solidarity, like she is thinking, I see you, Maddie, I get it. She is not issuing statements or standing up for her daughter on social media. She doesn't need to. The way she holds herself speaks volumes. The calm, grounded tone in her interviews, the way she speaks about her kids. It's clear she gets where Maddie's coming from. Because Janelle knows exactly what it's like to live next to Meri's intensity. She's experienced that cold politeness firsthand. She's seen how conversations turn into critiques, how boundaries are mistaken for disrespect. So when Maddie said what she said, Janelle didn't flinch. She likely sighed. Not in awe, but in acknowledgement. This wasn't news to her. It was something she knew long before the rest of the world did. And here is the thing, Janelle's always been the family's quiet pragmatist. She doesn't manufacture drama, but she won't deny it either. She is the type of person who understands that emotional calm is more valuable than family appearances. That is the energy she imparted to Maddie. That is why it was possible for Maddie to make such a bold statement without being cruel. She was brought up to prioritize honesty over appearances. It is not an accident that the only Brown children who really look grounded are the ones who were raised under Janelle's steady hand. They witnessed up close what balance feels like, and they witnessed too how dysfunction goes down when control is love's substitute. Janelle's understated encouragement is potent because it lays bare something discomforting that even among the wives, folks quietly concur with Maddie. They may not verbalize it, but you can observe it in the way they stand back. Christine, for instance, has a history with Meri. And although she has moved on, you can sense she gets Maddie's limits, too. These women have experienced years of the same unease Maddie's talking about. The contrast is, Maddie's age can now call it what it is. What is interesting is that Janelle's not trying to repair it. She is not telling Maddie to make peace or give Meri a second chance. That is a big deal. In most families, particularly those that take pride in being together, mothers guilt their children into remaining connected, even if it is poisonous. But Janelle's not doing that. She is allowing her daughter to guard her peace, even if it costs tension with those whom she once considered family. That is a sort of emotional maturity that this story rarely shows, and it is what makes Maddie's position so strong, because it is not rebellion for rebellion's sake. It is inherited strength. Janelle isn't perpetuating the drama. She is quietly dismantling the old rules by standing with her daughter's boundaries rather than guilt, tripping her into crossing them. And that is what is really rattling the family dynamic. Not the fight, but the fact that for once, someone's opting for peace over performance. The more Janelle stands in that quiet truth, the more clear it becomes that Maddie didn't just utter something provocative. She said something necessary. If anyone gets why Maddie said what she said, it is Christine. She has had the same emotional tug of war, the same unspoken tension, the same pressure to pretend like things were fine when they obviously weren't. Christine shared a roof with Meri for years, attempting to maintain peace that didn't actually exist. And if you've been watching Christine for long enough, you can observe that her public calm is constructed on hard-won lessons. So when Maddie asserted that Meri was too strict to connect with her children, Christine didn't jump to defend or deny. She didn't have to. Her silence, like Janelle's, was opposed neutrality, agreement in disguise, because Christine knows how that roughness feels. She has spoken before about how Meri might be intimidating, how she'd enter a room and then suddenly the air became thicker. Christine used to contract around her, second-guessing herself on everything she said. It wasn't that Meri was directly cruel, it was the perpetual sense that you were doing something you shouldn't be doing, even when you weren't. And now Maddie's telling us that same vibe is why she is distancing her own children from Meri's influence. It is history repeating itself. Except this time, someone's not going to repeat it. It is the part Christine admires. Christine spent years instilling in her children that love doesn't have to hurt, kindness isn't weakness, and you don't have to keep people close just because of your last name. She has created a new family based on that belief, and in Maddie, she sees someone doing the same, but sooner, wiser, and braver. What is fascinating is that Christine doesn't have to take sides here. Her entire life these days is about peace and safety. She is not invested in the old family politicking anymore. She is invested in the truth, and truth, in this case, is simple. Meri's version of love has always come with conditions. That's what makes Christine's quiet agreement so powerful. It's not gossip, it's validation. Behind the scenes, it's easy to imagine her having those mother-to-mother conversations with Janelle. Not about who's right or wrong, but about how proud they are of their kids for setting healthy boundaries. It's almost poetic in a way. The generation that once took emotional control for granted is now seeing their daughters dismantle it, publicly and unapologetically. And perhaps that is why Christine is keeping her comments in check. She knows this isn't revenge. It is evolution. Maddie's not seeking to punish Meri. She is doing what Christine ultimately had to do, move away from energy that keeps her diminutive. It is the same reason Christine parted with Kody. Both women came to the same realization. Sometimes the best thing you can do for your family is to stop acting like the people who hurt you are ever going to change. And in that quiet realization, Christine and Maddie are more similar than everyone knows. They both opted for peace, and they're finally free enough to explain why. While the adults attempt to play it cool, the actual discussions are going on in the background, between the children. And if you believe Maddie's the only person who feels the way she does regarding Meri, think again. Over time, some of the Brown children have intimated that the family emotional split did not begin with the parents' divorces. It has been there since they were tiny, in the attitude, in the pecking order, in who got the warmth and who didn't. Maddie may have been the first to voice it, but she is far from the first to feel it. You can spot it in the way the bigger kids, such as Logan, Michael T., and even Aspen, behave online. They don't interact with Meri the same way with Christine or Janelle. There is distance there, a politeness that is forced. It is not a hatred, it is avoidance. Because here is the reality nobody on camera will ever want to acknowledge. The kids have long memories. They remember who made them feel secure and who did not. Maddie spent her childhood observing which adults were friendly and who were prickly. The other children did the same, and although they may not all put it as succinctly, they've learned the same thing. Emotional safety is more important than family labels. Several of the younger ones, such as Gwendolyn and Ysabel, have even suggested online that there were times when the emotional climate of the family felt strained, even poisonous. They discuss therapy, boundaries, and healing, words you didn't hear much in the Brown home until recently. That change didn't occur randomly. It came from observing their parents break under the weight of appearances and deciding once and for all, we're not doing that again. Whatever makes Maddie's utterance so incendiary is that it reveals how deep that generational change goes. The old mantra, respect no matter what, silence is loyalty, no longer applies. These children aren't afraid to declare, that energy doesn't belong in my home. And the truth is, that frightens Meri more than anything, because unity with the family is something she feels defines her. Getting cut out, particularly by the newer generation, is akin to being erased. But what she doesn't realize is that this isn't about erasing her. It is about protecting peace. One can only imagine the private group chats erupting with excitement after Maddie's words went viral. Some maybe said, she is courageous. Others probably said, she just spoke up for all of us. And possibly a few confessed that they felt guilty, not for what she said, but for how much truth there was in it. The majority of the Brown children's silence is not neutrality, it is an unspoken concurrence. They're having Maddie catch the flack for speaking her mind about what they have all gone through in varying degrees. And perhaps that is why she doesn't seem concerned about blowback. She knows she isn't standing by herself. Because the reality is, this isn't one daughter criticizing an old family friend. This is a generation finally reclaiming its emotional space. And once that happens, there's no going back. You'd think after Maddie's comment blew up, Meri would rush to defend herself, post a response, clarify her side, maybe even throw in one of those cryptic, protect your peace Instagram quotes she's famous for. But this time, she didn't. No post, no interview, no reaction, just silence. And honestly, that silence says everything. Meri's been here before. The target of internet criticism, family tension, and emotional isolation. But what's different now is that this isn't about rumors or editing. It's about perception. It's about how she makes people feel. And that's something she can't control with a camera or a caption. She's smart enough to know that if she fires back, it'll make her look defensive. But doing nothing doesn't make her appear better either. Instead, it confirms what Maddie had stated, that she is disconnected, untouchable, and not willing to connect in actual ways. It is tragic in a way because you can see how Meri's constructed her entire sense of self on strength and survivability. But in the process, she forgot how to be soft. The truth is, Meri's emotional armor, the independence, the discipline, the constant self-control might have protected her from Kody's rejection, but it's also kept everyone else at arm's length. Now that armor's starting to crack, and instead of letting anyone in, she's retreating even further. Behind the scenes, people close to her say she feels misunderstood, that she genuinely doesn't know how she became the villain in a story she helped build. And that is the saddest thing, because Meri is not a bad person. She is just stuck in the version of herself she had to be to survive a man who never made her feel chosen. The issue is, she is still living as if that man were in the room. That harshness Maddie referred to. It is not spite, it is defense. But for children, particularly Maddie's, that difference does not matter. Energy is energy, and if it feels heavy, it is heavy. Meri's silence, intentional or not, is confirming what everyone already suspects. She doesn't know how to bridge the gap anymore. She's lost in the very persona she created. You can sense that even her attempts at positivity, the motivational quotes, the business updates, the I'm thriving tone, come from a place of overcompensation. It's her way of saying, I'm fine, don't look too closely. But Maddie looked closely, and now the world is too. There is a difference between being strong and being closed off. Meri hasn't learned that yet, and until she does, no amount of silence or self-help talk is going to repair her reputation. Because reputation isn't what is broken. Relationships are. If ever Meri is to shift how she is perceived, she'll need to do something she has never felt at ease doing. Listen, not reply, not expound. Simply listen, because sometimes quiet doesn't make you appear tough. It makes you appear guilty, and currently, the silence surrounding Meri Brown is deafening. For years, the Browns marketed one narrative. A narrative regarding oneness, religion, and the notion that love was possible across several dwellings. It was complicated, but they held it up as holy. Now that narrative's coming apart, Maddie's words didn't merely address one individual. They made everyone, the family and the fans, re-examine what family really means in this new stage. Because if you take away the television cameras, the religion, and the family titles, what you have left are people struggling to learn how to love without losing themselves. And that is where things get real. The reality is, the old Brown family was constructed on endurance, not intimacy. They were glued together by structure, not security. They appeared for appearances, not necessarily for one another. And when that sort of foundation finally gives way, it doesn't break silently, it falls apart publicly. Maddie's statement was the sound of the collapse resounding throughout each corner of the Sister Wives universe. But here is the thing, it is not all terrible. Because through that wreckage, something healthier is emerging. Maddie's idea of family isn't about blood or same last names. It is about energy, about how her children feel when they're around the people she refers to as family. It is about being, not doing. And that is why what she said to Meri hurt so much. It is a line in the sand between old allegiance and new truth. That change is uncomfortable. But it is also evolution. Janelle and Christine do appear to understand that. Both of them have created new lives based on emotional safety and self-sufficiency. They're demonstrating to their children that family does not have to be hierarchical performative, that you can be connected without selecting chaos. They're still clinging to the family they can control in Meri and Kody, unaware that control is what pushed everyone away. The Brown children are adults now. They're not enacting the old script, they're making their own rules. And that is what is making the audience so captivated, because it is not reality television anymore. It is a case study of what occurs when a family built on control meets up with a generation conditioned to authenticity. For the fans who've been along since season 1, this is like closure. They've witnessed all the Browns, from the early smiles to the quiet jealousy, the unraveling, and now, at last, the truth. It is raw, but it is real. Maddie's statement isn't the scandal everyone makes it out to be. It is the truth everyone's been waiting for. It is a daughter saying, "This is healing, even though it hurts you." And perhaps that is the true lesson. Family isn't about forcing relationships where there is only tension. It is about understanding when love requires distance to thrive. That is what Maddie's teaching, not only to her children, but to all of us who've ever observed this family and asked ourselves what happened wrong. Because perhaps nothing happened wrong. Perhaps this is what happening right looks like at last. When you pull back and see the entire picture, it is obvious. Maddie didn't simply make a remark. She made history in this family. For years, the Browns were known for one thing holding it together. They smiled through heartbreak, defended the indefensible, and called survival faith. But Maddie's quiet honesty cracked that illusion wide open. By saying, "Meri's too harsh to ever bond with my kids," she drew a line that generations before her were too afraid to draw. She wasn't cruel, she was clear. And in this family, subtlety is subversive. What she did was reclaim her own story. Something her parents never actually did. Kody attempted to control it all and lost everyone. Meri attempted to control her public image and was left alone. But Maddie, she is controlling her peace. That is a new kind of power. Her choice isn't made out of anger. It derives from consciousness, from decades of observing emotional mess masquerading as love. She is not excluding Meri to be mean. She is excluding her because she knows peace isn't something you plead for. It is something you guard. And that realignment, from endurance to boundaries, from performance to reality, is redefining what the Brown family name stands for. Because let's be real, the legacy Kody established was tenuous. It may have appeared solid on television, but it was maintained through fear, guilt, and endless competition. Every wife and every child learned how to survive under the system. But Maddie's generation, they're learning how to live beyond it. And that is what terrifies the older generation most. Maddie is not attempting to destroy the family brand. She is seeking to create a healthier one that doesn't depend on coerced forgiveness or emotional allegiance. One where her children can grow up being surrounded by authentic warmth, rather than silent resentment. You can see how that makes all the difference. The sister wives narrative began as a narrative about polygamy, but it is concluding as a narrative of healing, about women and children learning to relearn love after decades of misremembering. And in that self-transformation, Maddie becomes the bridge between two worlds, the world she was born into and the one she is creating now. Her decision sends a message not only to Meri, but to everyone who has ever been instructed to endure discomfort in the name of keeping the family intact. Sometimes keeping your family safe means keeping them safe from the patterns that destroyed you. That is what Maddie's doing, ending the cycle boundary by boundary, and perhaps years later when her children are adults, they'll see why she made this decision. They'll realize she didn't do it because she was bitter, but because she loved, the kind that won't control, the kind that won't silence. Because the truth is, Maddie Brush didn't just speak. She established the tone for a new generation of Browns, one that prefers honesty to harmony, peace to show, and truth to tradition. And that, above any television moment or headline, will be her actual legacy.